Hey, what's going on? This is Andrew. Welcome to the Lens Rentals channel. Last week, if you watched the video, you know I was stuck in my house for a full week because of a crazy winter storm that hit us here in the south. And I was stuck with the Leica SL2-S as well as a few Leica L-mount lenses, and I wanted to go ahead and do something creative while I was stuck inside, so I made a short. In today's video, I'm gonna break down that short, but more specifically, I'm gonna talk about the lenses I use for certain shots. I'm gonna talk about the camera experience as a whole, and then ultimately I'm gonna kind of break down the pros and cons of using Leica as a video camera for your creative endeavors, whether it be for on-set productions, short stories, or student films, things like that. I wanna make sure that I'm clear as to why you might wanna pick up this camera. I've got my laptop right here. I'm gonna watch the short together. I'm gonna give you my critiques in real time. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so looking at this opening sequence here, this was all shot on the 35mm f2 lens, which I feel like is good. We needed a wide establishing shot to set up the short as a whole. The kitchen scenes were fun. This was also shot inside the fridge with the 35mm f2, but the rest of the shots were shot on the 50mm, like right here. And then the shots of Brittany eating, which we're going to see in a second, was shot on the 50. This, however, the tea section was shot on the 90mm, and I have to say, like this close section, I love the 90mm. So right here, this is that 50mm. This is the standard, like what the human eye sees, and you know, I wasn't necessarily wild about that lens personally, or the 35mm in tighter conditions, but I thought it might be appropriate for, you know, this sequence. Those tights were done on the 75mm as well, just in case you were wondering. And yeah, just kind of the slow pan out. That's a digital zoom with that 50mm, just to kind of convey the longing and kind of the bored character that Britt here was playing. So this next sequence I'm actually pretty stoked on because I really wanted to push this camera's low light capabilities. And as you can see here, I feel like it did really well. I exposed for the light outside in the windows. So that way, I got a nice and dark interior shot here. There's a little lamp lighting her face, which is how we get a little bit of that like warmth on her. You kind of see it on the door jamb as well there. But yeah, no, I really liked kind of stopping down or stopping up to, to expose for that room properly. And the 90mm again, just tight and very beautiful. That f2 focus is really nice, and it looks great. This was on the, I think, 35mm again. That dark silhouette, just again, trying to play with the low light on the camera. And then all these exterior shots that you're seeing that I'm cutting to were done on the 75. These are done on the 75, actually. More 75 goodness. Just trying to convey like what she's missing out on, right? What's going to be the inspiration to transfer out of her bored adult snow day, which is just us usually working from home, as opposed to running around enjoying the snow. That's how I was feeling, at least. These were done on the 75mm here. I think it looks really good. I love the separation. You can see that shot was a little wobbly. I did put a stabilizer on it. I wish I didn't do that. This getting ready sequence was shot on the 35mm as well. There's Maisie, our dog, being cute. She's so sweet. We love her. Cool. And then this whole sequence here was shot on the 35 as well. And I will say that without any NDs, it was really tricky to kind of get the exposure right. I'm happy with how things came out. I had to do a lot more work in post on these exterior shots, especially with that direct sunlight, hitting. It was a lot. It was a lot to correct because everything felt like overexposed. Notice the focus was soft there. I'm going to get into that in a little bit, but really that boils down to the autofocus that the SL2-S has. I wasn't a fan of it, so there's a few moments of like softer focus that I didn't love. I'll get to that shot in a second. Obviously, my favorite sequence of the whole thing was the spinning and then having her fall down and cutting to this, missed work call, reconnecting with your roots as a child and kind of getting out in the snow. This was fun, and this was shot in 35mm. I really feel like this is where the lens looked the best. The phone shot's the 75mm, but the exterior shot is the 35mm. Some soft focus here at the end too as well, which is unfortunate, but we'll get into some of the pros and cons of running and filming without any kit. So that was a short. If you enjoyed it, I'd recommend seeing it without me talking about what I think worked or didn't work. There's going to be a card somewhere on the screen here that you can click on to enjoy that without my commentary. But if you're ready to dive into some more specific details about the SL2-S and about my experience making the short, stick around. So let's talk about the pros first, the things that I really enjoyed. Build quality of Leica cameras in general feels really impressive. It's amazing, and I loved how the SL2-S felt in my hands. Just solid. The other thing that I really enjoyed was the image stabilization in the camera. Having to handhold everything. For context, I didn't have any proper gear with me. I didn't have any rigging. I didn't have an external monitor. I didn't have tripods. I didn't have lights. This was all shot handheld with natural light or some lamps that we had in the house. The image stabilization really helped me, especially with the longer focal length lenses like 75-90. There's just a lot more jitter that you get. Now, you did notice that I stabilized one of the shots just to see what would happen, and it warped really weird. I think that's just digital stabilization in your NLE. I probably could have finessed that a little bit more, but I just wanted to put that on to test it. And honestly, I probably would have left it off. Color profile that I'm not really used to editing in is L-Log. I don't know Leica's log profile very well, but I was surprised and I enjoyed editing with it. What I've normally done in the past, especially with my Canon cameras, is I've exposed to the right. With this Leica, I was actually exposing a half stop to 1 or even 2 stops to the left. I was actually underexposing, but I had seen in some forums that was a good method, a good approach to your post process. If you could film a couple stops down or a half stop down, you'll get the exposure you're looking for. And L-Log really formed well. Oh, and by the way, I was really happy with the low light as well. I thought that the camera did really well. The SL2-S, I always mess up the name. I messed it up in the last video. The SL2-S was designed to be a better low light camera than the SLS. And the last thing I'll say about the pros of using the camera are that once you get used to the button layout, it's not familiar, especially if you're a Sony, Canon, or Fuji user. Leica does things their own way. Their menus are a little bit different, and their buttons and their placements are a little bit different. But once you get used to it, you can start to really create on the fly quickly. And this is true with any system, really. But I do want to say that I felt Leica's system in some areas felt really intuitive, while in others it didn't. So it's a pro, but also a good transition to the cons. All right, so let's talk about the cons now while filming. Again, without any rigging, without any proper monitors or things like that. This is just with the camera in your hand. I would say that the very first thing was being able to check your focus peaking was nearly impossible in video mode or cine mode, with the SL2-S. I could not make out my focus because I was manual focusing, right? So usually you have red, blue, green outlines that tell you and help you see what your focus is to help you nail that shot. I could see it a lot better on photo mode, so through the viewfinder, through the LCD. But switching over to video mode or cine mode and using the LCD or the viewfinder was much more difficult to do. A workaround for this was literally switching back and forth between the modes. So I would try to get my focus in photo mode, I would switch over to video mode, knowing that if I didn't move my body, I would be in focus and I'd be able to get the shot. That was really frustrating, and that's when I really felt the need for a proper monitor. I think autofocus was lacking as well. I wasn't wild about the autofocus. It took me a while to really figure out the best way to utilize it. They're intelligent, they're IAF. I'm just spoiled, man. Like Canon, Fuji, Sony, they're just great. So this one felt like it was lacking a bit. I'm just gonna say it. I know this is like an old and tired thing to say in 2024, but I will say it until this happens. I love an articulating screen. I love a flip out screen. Why cameras don't have them, for whatever reason, I don't get it. I don't think that it's like a badge of honor to not have a flip out screen. I don't think it makes you a better filmmaker or photographer to not have a flip out screen, especially when a lot of us are starting to become hybrid shooters or filming by ourselves. It's a necessity. Another con for me was that the camera has great internal recording. 10-bit recording is phenomenal, 4K. I love that, but you need really good SD cards. Remember, I was snowed in, so I didn't have any of my gear. All my gear was here in the studio. I'm 15 minutes away from the studio. I wasn't gonna be able to make it out, and I had this like really kind of crappy SD card. It's really good for maybe like simple, leisurely photo taking, not meant for video. So I had a lot of issues with playback and just the camera processing the image I was recording, as well as recording limits as a whole. Like, they were extremely short. Luckily, when things melted down a little bit, I was able to get back to the studio and grab the SD cards that I needed. It was definitely a challenge. So when you're picking up any camera that can produce good internal recording codecs, you need really solid SD cards. Last two notes on the cons were simply this. Some of the form factor stuff that I mentioned earlier was intuitive and unintuitive. I think the unintuitive parts stick out to me more than the intuitive parts, meaning I'm used to more dials and more buttons and options on the fronts of the camera. Specifically, a front dial or a top dial makes a lot of sense that you can map that to ISO or aperture if you're trying to go on the fly, kind of run and gun filmmaking. There's no front dial. I think that to get into the menus is awkward as well. Click menu and it brings you to a reference menu for your settings. When you click menu again, it brings you into a deeper menu. Anyway, it wasn't an awesome experience. I'm sure this is one of those things that you can solve by just spending more time with the camera. But I do really feel like, especially with my Canon cameras, they've always felt really intuitive and they've always felt really easy to utilize. So I feel like that might be a con, especially if you're picking this up for a shoot and you've never really dealt with the Leica system before. You're going to be asking questions. So with all that being said, I will say though, the experience as a whole, like I was really happy with what I was able to get. And the question that I'm seeing and a lot of people are asking me is, why Leica? I've done a couple of videos on Leica now and people were wondering, like, what's the point? Like, we have Fuji, we have Sony, we have Canon, like Leica feels unattainable because of its price point, and you know, some of those weird quirks. We're not as familiar with the systems of Leica. From what I'm deriving so far, the benefit is really access to those L mount and M mount lenses. I've heard from a few of my friends who own the SL2-S that adapting M mount lenses to this camera is really where it shines. Now, I went with just L mount primes. I went with the 90mm, 70mm, 50mm, and 35mm, and they're all f2, and they're all great lenses. Like, the glass is solid. Now, I know that there's mounts and adapters and things like that we can get, but there is something to be said about using native glass with a native body that I feel like shouldn't be overlooked. Maybe one more benefit is also just some of the color science. It's just a different look. It's a preference thing at the end of the day. If you really are drawn to those colors, if you really are drawn to the glass, then this is the camera you're gonna want to pick up. I think another reason why you might choose a Leica camera is because they're not traditional for video. I really feel like when we think of Leica, we think of photography. We think of, you know, the M6, the M11, we think of street photography or beautiful landscapes, and that's great. I love that. But it's fun to see them take a step into the video space and be a little bit more intentional with the videographers, filmmakers in mind with this camera. Here's the deal. At the end of the day, I think it's a pretty sweet camera. I think that you can't go wrong with the choice. I think that you just need to know that there's going to be some barriers and hurdles, especially if you've not dealt with Leica systems in the past. If you're trying to experience the glass natively with a native body, the L-mount glass is awesome. I really enjoyed it and I highly recommend it. I really do. If you're working at a production company or if you are building your own production company, if you're a freelance hybrid shooter, you know, I mean, the Fuji makes some great cameras. Canon, like the R6, the R5 are really solid. Sony's line of cameras is also really great. So, you know, if you're looking for something that you don't need to learn right away, if you're looking for something that is a little bit more common, a little bit more, you know, expected maybe, then maybe go with those other options. That's gonna be it for today's video. Thanks for sticking around. We have some new stuff coming up. We're trying to continue to hone what we're creating here at the Lens Journals channel. So bear with us and thanks for engaging with us and thanks for being a part of what we're doing here in 2024. I'm excited. Can't wait for the next video to come out. And until then, I will see you in the next one. All right. Peace. Cut.